Welcome to Wild and Awake, an online retreat where you deepen your consciousness, arouse your courage, and choose with wisdom. We are exploring the question, how do I live my best life right now? I am your host, Kari Van Tine. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Wild and Awake. Today, I am so thrilled to have with us Kaylin Castell. Welcome, Kaylin.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Kaylin K. Castell is the co-founder of Venus Alchemy and My Star Alchemy. My Star Alchemy. In addition to writing monthly celestial timings for over 27 years, she enjoys sharing these mysteries through personal readings and teaching, both online and in-person events, changing lives and perspectives from the visionary understanding that we inform the mysteries as much as they inform us. Kaylin, that is that last line there is just a beautiful way for us to jump into our work together today. And for the audience who's listening, I would like you to know that before beginning, both Kaylin and I called in our support systems and just took a moment to recognize we have a lot of information we're wanting to share today. And we're asking for all of our guidance to help us figure out what parts of this are the most important and need to be heard today. So I wanted you to see a little behind the scenes of two women working together right now, looking at how do we sculpt a conversation that really gives support and vision for those who are listening. So Kaylin, just to jump us right in on that beautiful, potent line, we inform the mysteries as much as they inform us. It's a beautiful line, but what does that mean?
I know. What does it mean?
What does that mean?
I love that saying so much. It's actually on the banner on my website. Because I just feel like it's something that we forgot. And maybe not even forgot, we were encouraged to forget. Because when the mysteries, not just how we relate the earth and the sky, but all the mysteries of life, basically were taken over by the dominator culture. And so that we could no longer have our own direct connection to great mystery, to the unfolding mysteries, to what's really true for us in our own lives. And we were encouraged to put that outside of ourselves. So we forgot that when we're having a relationship with what's going on in life, with the sky, with the earth, with the seasons, with the moon phases, with the planetary interactions, that our intentions and how we engage with that is us informing the mysteries, but we're being informed by them in so many different ways. Yeah. So if you're at a new moon, it's a time to plant seeds. If you're at a new seasonal point, there's that season will have different energies to it. And cultures around the world were building standing stone circles, pyramids, petroglyph sites, chambered cairns, temple sites, and lots of different ways that they were tracking the magical link between the earth and the sky and the seasonal cycles and when to do certain ceremonies and all of that. And that really has been suppressed and repressed in major ways. So we forgot, and we're not realizing that we're equal co-creators. We're co-creating with great mystery all the time, whether we're aware of it or not, based on what we believe, what we think, what we're saying, how we're showing up, how we're vibrating. All those things are part of that co-creative process. And sometimes we can feel like we're at the effect of
but or minuscule or unimportant, right? And there's that great history, and then there's little me, struggling along in life versus me having a say in what's occurring with this relationship with something that's bigger.
Right, exactly. And sometimes we are being required to surrender and let go and die to a way of being. And there are certain cycles that will represent that. And it helps to know, because if we're fighting for something, and I've done this, it's like, and it just gets worse and harder and more difficult. And it's like, oh my God, how am I not fixing this? How am I not making this better? And then finally surrendering and going, oh, it's because I was supposed to let it go. And it helps to know when it's time for that, because it'll get us to that point more quickly, so that we because it's not being done to us, it's being done for us. And sometimes it feels like it's being done to us, like somehow we're being punished by whatever's happening. I know the first time I went through a major life change and cycles that represented that change, I didn't know anything about astrology at the time. I thought I was being punished. Like I'm trying to do the best I can. I'm the best person I know how to be, and nothing I'm doing is fixing this situation. And when I got on the other side of it and I got out of it, I was like, oh, I get it. I was being redirected. I wasn't being punished. I was being redirected because it was like the direction I had gone in was okay for a while, but it wasn't working anymore. And it needed to be a new direction now. And that was like so illuminating. It's like, oh.
And that brings me to Kaylin, your work as an astrologist, which I will also say to people who are listening, you wear many, many hats. So I'm really hesitant to give you one hat. I'll just say you wear many, many hats, of which one of them is that you were a very talented, skilled astrologer. And your work is shamanic astrology. How does that differ? And I feel like this is important to say because there's something you're talking about right now, which is really sort of pivotal in the actual work that you do.
Yes. So there's a lot of different ways to do astrology. They all work. They all have validity. Whatever we focus our attention on will work. But what I love about being in a more shamanic way of doing things, it's like you go out under the sky. You see the planets and the moon and you connect with what's actually really visually going on there, and you can get downloads and information. There was a book written by a woman named Paige Bryant called Star Walking, Traveling into the Night, Shamanic Practices for Traveling into the Night Sky, that she wrote that. I got it in the 90s. I think she wrote it in the 90s. Anyway, I was just lit up by that book because it's just that confirmation that this is what ancient cultures did. They weren't sitting around watching TV at night. They were out under the sky. And that's why they built their standing stone circles and their pyramids and their temple sites in different ways, because they were capturing things that were happening seasonally, as well as different star risings and different, like the 19-year lunar standstill. There's stone circles in Scotland that were capturing the moon walking across the land, and they would know, and it was like every 19 years it would happen that the moon would travel right through the stone circle, or look like it was rolling right through the stone circle. And Chimney Rock, the only time that the moon is rising between the chimneys is at the 19-year lunar standstill. And they were building kivas every 19 years, and archaeologists could not figure out why. Why are they doing that every 19 years? And an archaeoastronomer comes along. His name is Kim Melville, and he's going, oh, it's because the moon rises between the chimneys every 19 years, and that it doesn't happen any other time. So they were so attuned. They were co-creating. They were being informed by the mysteries. They knew when the timing was, and then they were helping to inform by creating their sacred places, a standing stone circle, a kiva, or whatever it was, to work with those mysteries and to have their intention and attention on these special times. So this is about getting that back. It's that shamanic, what the word really means, and it comes from Russia, like the high mountains in Russia. It was where the term actually comes from. It means experiential. It's the experience. It's not something outside of us. It's not something somebody's doing for us. It's our own direct experience. So shamanic astrology is about having your own direct experience. You need, sometimes it's helpful to get some insights to start with, and then to cultivate your own way of being with these mysteries, your own ceremonial intentions, and like working with the moon phases and doing ceremonies at that time, working with certain star alignments and doing ceremonies at that time, working with the Venus cycle, doing ceremonies when the Venus and the moon come together. It's like changes everything. It's so amazing, because then we feel like we're participating with great mystery. We're not just having it happen to us.
Thank you. Thank you for unfolding that out. I feel like that's really helpful to see that whole laying it down. And I want to mention also that the great mysteries that we're calling the great mysteries right now, at the time that they were being originally practiced, were probably not seen as mystery. They were probably seen as reality.
Yeah. Right. Well, if you think about mystery, I love this because in all the priestess work I've done and over the many years, we talked about his story,
Mhm.
and her story, and mystery is my story. So if you think about it, it's like, how are we creating our own story? My story, mystery. How am I engaging the mystery? How am I engaging my own story and being a co-creator in creating my own story?
I love that.
It's the mystery of who we are.
Mystery. And the mystery, that if we were to go back in time, actually, I spent quite a lot of time in Scotland, that there's those standing stones, they were a part of real life. They were part of, my story, her story, his story. They were part of how we know when to plant our fields, when the seasons are shifting, what year is this going to be good for, what's happening in, all those cycles. If you were to be looking at somebody right now in our, our society, in which we've really become disconnected in so many ways to that real earth-based, tangible reality. If you were to encourage someone at this point to be finding their way back, or finding their way to my story, mystery, her story, his story, where would you encourage somebody to begin?
That's a really good question. It might be different for different people, but so I'll just say where I began was I went to a talk on, somebody talking about shamanic astrology. And I grew up in a very spiritual family. My parents were Rosicrucians, and I went to Unity Church. I was initiated into transcendental meditation when I was 16, went to the college in Fairfield, Iowa. I mean, I had an unusual, and I always thought astrology was interesting, but complicated. And when I heard this kind of looking at, and the talk was on the moon, but it was looking at it as, looking at it archetypally and mythically, and what does it mean, and what's the intent, and how do we work with it that way, I just lit up and knew that I had to know more. So the first thing I did was got a reading. And it was like, it was so my life. It lit me up even more because the way it was explained, it made so much sense to me. And so that started me on my journey. Now, it might not be the same for everybody. One of the things people can do is you can just go out and start tracking the moon and watching it cross. It's like, so when there's a new moon, the crescent moon, within so many hours after the new moon, usually a day or so after the new moon, there will be a little tiny crescent moon in the west. And then it gets a little further up each night, a little further up, a little further up, a little, and then we had a full moon rising as the sun is setting 2 weeks later. So starting to just be with the sky and watch it as it's passing different stars and different planets can be a great way, because the whole point is to learn how to tap in and get your own insight and information. And sometimes it's helpful to connect with somebody who can give you that. To get started, but it's not required. It doesn't.
Maybe it's also a both and, like there's different kinds of information, right?
Yeah.
There's the shamanic piece that is really the felt, sensed, experienced, being out in nature and actually building a relationship with the night sky and with the moon, so that it matters to you what the information is, and then finding out more information.
Yeah. And there's books out there. There's actually a shamanic astrology handbook. If people want to start there, they can start to get some insights from that. Also the other thing that people might find helpful to figure out is what time is it for them. Everybody has certain cycles they go through. And most anybody who knows anything about astrology knows there's a Saturn return at age, 29, 30. There's a second Saturn return at age 58, 59. There's like certain cycles everyone goes through at a certain age, at specific ages. Jupiter returns and Uranus opposition and the Neptune square and nodal returns and the 19-year moon return on the birthday for a person. as well. So at 19, 38, 57, 76, 95, those are significant birthdays because of the 19-year moon coming back at the birthday with the sun. It comes back in that same relationship. So there's certain things that we can tune into to know what time it is. And I'm telling you, that time when my life got burned to the ground and I didn't know anything about astrology. I remember I went and I saw an astrologer, just a quick little 10-minute reading. He's like, wow, you've been through a big life change. And I'm like, you can see that, and you can see that, you can tell that. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh my God. It was just like, that was my first hint that, oh, there's cycles that happen that are working for us if we know how to work with them. So that, anyway, and I thought, if I had known this while I was going through all of this, I would have maybe not tortured myself as long. in resisting and letting go of what I needed to let go of.
And a lot of us do that, right? We're in that place of struggle. And I bet there's a number of people watching us right now is like in the struggle. One of the things I'm aware of in the work that you do, and I really love your practices, is that there's a way of you looking at somebody's direction as like, what is this person actually here for? What's being called, right? And there's a funny dance, or I would say there's a dance, at least for me, when I'm looking at astrology, between what is predestined and what is choice. Like where, and then we put that in with, we're part of the mystery, right? So we've got quite a web happening here. How do you work with that? How does that make sense to you?
Well, so what we can do when we're looking at a person's chart is we can see what was the soul's intent when they incarnated. And we're not looking at it specifically like, oh, be a doctor, be a teacher, be a coach, be a whatever. It's looking at what are the mysteries, mystery, you've come to explore. You've come to learn how to embody, to express, to help evolve, because everything is in an evolutionary process, and we live in a speeded up evolutionary time.
We sure do.
So, like, oh my gosh, it's happening so fast. I mean, from the time that, when I was growing up to now, it's like, oh my gosh, things have changed so much. I mean, when I was initiated into transcendental meditation at the age of 16, everybody thought that was just the weirdest thing.
And now it's being brought into the school systems. I mean,
yeah, and yoga and all those different things. It's like, and being a vegetarian and whatever. It's like if I went into a restaurant, it was like I would eat a salad and a baked potato or something, because it was like that was the only thing that was available to people who didn't eat meat at the time. So it's changed so fast and so much since then. And so anyway, but the whole point being that the idea of destiny and free will, or fate and free will is another way of saying that, is that there are certain things that we do not have control over. One of them is we don't have control over the sun rising and setting every day. It's just going to happen, and we can accept it or not accept it. We can fight it, or we can just be like, okay, the sun's going to rise and set. Some days it's going to be cloudy. Some days it's not. It's going to be different seasons. It's going to be summer hot or winter cold, or, those are things that we don't have control over. So we learn how to navigate through. And there are other factors, like the family we're born into, our genetics, our DNA. We don't have control over that necessarily. Maybe we chose it before we came in, but once we're here, this is what you got. This is what you're dealing with. Yeah. And our free will is how we choose to deal with these things. So if we have an understanding, and one of the things I've found a lot is that people, a lot of times what I find is I'm telling people things they kind of know deep in their heart is true for them, like this is why they're here, but they haven't felt they had permission, that they thought they were supposed to live their life in a certain way and accomplish certain things and be whatever. And then when they are given the insights from a mythical archetypal perspective, not from it should be this or that, not from a predetermined or predictive place, it's from it's like from that understanding of the greater energies of these archetypes, and they can manifest in many, many ways. And none of them are right or wrong. They're just, are you manifesting them in the way that lights you up, that gets you excited, that you feel aligned with? And I'll just say quickly, I have twins. They're a boy and a girl, but they have identical charts. They're 3 minutes apart. So they've been one of my best teachers. Like, I watch how they manifest their archetypes in there. It's energetically the same, but detail wise, it's different, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And
yeah.
what a great, I don't know, sort of like project to sort of be watching as you are somebody who's reading charts, just noticing you could have collapsed and had both their charts say exactly the same thing. And my guess is they're not quite the same people.
They're not, but their similarities. It's like when they're going through cycles, the similarities of their experiences, like energetically, the similarities, because the details are different, but it's like, I see that. Like, okay, you're wondering what to do with your work right now, or this is changing in your work right now. It's like it happens kind of like simultaneously in their lives. So it's been amazing and then just how they express too. Both are there's a lot of Aries, so they're both very passionate and engaged. My daughter's a super athlete and my son's a stuntman. Very Aries, both of them. So anyway,
I love that. And so that subtle difference. And so for people who are listening to this right now too, to just be with that there's a certain amount. I love that little thread. I just want to tug on it, which is that there's a certain amount that's set up. There's certain, and then there's like, what are we doing with this? Whether this is, being influenced by what your moon or your sun is, and your genetics and where you grew up, and whatever else might be influencing this physical body.
Right.
We then have choice.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's our free will to choose whatever. And, sometimes it's a little more challenging for people to choose something that's it's like, oh, this is what I get to deal with. And this is the mountain I chose to climb.
Yes.
And we all have challenges, no doubt about it. We all have
doubt about it. Lynn, you mentioned in there, and I just want to sort of add it to, because we're talking about the astrology, but something I know that you have a huge history in is your work with archetypes, with priestess energy, with the different goddesses, with kind of unpacking these other faces that the mystery shows up in, which probably sometimes work right alongside the astrology, but also work as their own archetypes. Could you speak a little bit about how you use these archetypes? I know you work with Venus. I also know that you work with Inanna, and I think we talked the other day about Tara. So those are some pretty powerful forces.
Yeah.
How do you find these forms useful?
So if we think about the goddess imagery of the stories that we've inherited as archetypal energy, and it represents different aspects of, say, if we're going to look at goddesses, different aspects of the feminine. So, if we think about Hera or Juno, they both represented the relational aspect of the feminine. If we look at Aries, we could look at Pallas Athena, the warrior, or we could look at any, the Amazon warriors, and how many have considered them to be the most fierce army, or, warriors that have ever lived on the planet. Then more than men, even, actually. But of course, that doesn't get really spoken about too much. But they're, that desire to create and protect and defend and actually restore justice where needed. That's the Aries expression of the feminine. But we could see that through different goddess archetypes that were warrior goddesses. In fact, there's I think it's still on Amazon, called Warrior Women, and Lucy Lawless, who was Xena, which is also a very Aries expression of the feminine. So she is the host of this, and we look at 5 women through history that were warrior types, warrior women. It's brilliant. It's really well done. They're not goddesses per se, although Boudica, Queen Boudica from the British, or the, I guess it's probably somewhere around in that part of the world. She's kind of elevated to a goddess status. But anyway, so then there's the Gemini rainbow goddess. We could say Iris, the rainbow goddess, who is not from here. She's not from there. She can be anywhere. She's fun. She's playful. She's the messenger. So that, a lot of people who have Venus and Gemini will relate to her as a goddess expression. So, so we can kind of get a sense of there's many different expressions of the feminine. There's not just, mother, helpmate,
Mother, maiden, crone.
Yeah, but mother, nurse, caretaker, the kind of the limited roles that we've had in our patriarchal culture. It's way more than that. And so oftentimes women who have had, like, say my mother is a really good example. She had an Aries moon. She was never really able to, except as a child growing up, be in that expression, because when she was married, she had to do what her husband told her, because she was from that time period. And she didn't fight that. She didn't, it was hard for her. I've seen other women like that.
Domesticated.
Yeah. And it's like, so you may have an expression of the feminine that isn't accepted. And then how do you get to live that? Well, I think it's changing, thank God. And so I think there's more options available to women nowadays to express their feminine. But here's the thing, men also have an inner feminine, just the same as women have an inner masculine. And so if there's, and this dominator culture has been as damaging to men and their masculine expression, because there's only certain expressions that are acceptable, to be the corporate tycoon, or to be the warrior, or to be the conqueror, or those kinds of things. It's like, and men who have deep, heartfelt, compassionate places within them, well, maybe they could be a doctor. Maybe they could, maybe they could work in the healing arts in some way or something, but it's been difficult for them too. And so how do we open the space to recognize there's many different ways to be masculine, there's many different ways to be feminine, and the chart gives us the clues about what we want to honor. And what we've found is that when we can get to that place, when people can get to that place where they understand it, they get it, and they start nurturing and cultivating that, it's like so fulfilling and magical. Like magical things start happening in a person's life. It's incredible.
That's beautifully said, Kaylin. I was, as you're speaking, I was just, envisioning some of the archetypes and the goddesses that you're mentioning. And I want to recognize that many women in our culture haven't been exposed to the goddess imagery as something other than really in what we might we might call new age, in a way that's sort of off-putting, right? Versus being able to own it. And in this conversation here, I actually want to put that on the table, because I think this is a really delicate dance that we're doing. Because I'd like for everybody who's hearing this right now to recognize that these archetypes are actually, many of them are thousands of years old, and they didn't just spring out of social media in the last 10 years because it was cool, right? Or that we're making movies about it. And these ancient energy art, like the term of an archetype, right? Where the distilling of a personality or the qualities come together, then become options for us to look to for inspiration, for encouragement, for potential other direction. So when you're speaking about, men and women having, set roles, or your mother in a particular role, or men in the workforce, I get delighted at the idea of, like, what would happen if that that energy of Aries was to come in for the woman, and she was actually really able to cultivate and own it and give it a place at the table. Like that there can be many seats at our table. It's part of how I think envisioning in this work, and I think you do too, is that we're made up of many parts, and we don't just have to be Aries. We actually get to be Aries and Inanna and Hecate, whoever else might be sitting at the table.
Right. Yeah, all of it. I mean, really, it's everything. We are the universe. Everything exists within us. There might be some things that we've placed a focus on in our life, and that may change over time as well. And I love that you brought up Hecate. The Scorpio expression of the feminine is one that has been the most repressed and suppressed, because the dominator culture was very afraid of that archetype. She's Kali, she's Hecate, she's any goddess of death and rebirth. Pele is another expression of that. And so that was why women were burned at the stake, because they were suppressing the power of that archetypal energy, because they didn't know what to do with it, and they didn't want it to be present in the reality that they were creating as the dominator culture. And so lots of times women will have a strong resonance with having been burned at the stake for doing nothing, for trying to heal people, for being a midwife, for gathering herbs, for simple things. And that is something that those who are here to learn Scorpio, it can take them a while to even feel comfortable with going, oh, I can be powerful. It doesn't mean I have to have power over others. I can just be powerful in my own right, in my own being. And learning how to do that in a way that hopefully doesn't threaten other people, but it will, because that's the shadow that's still there, and it's gonna need to come out and get resolved somehow.
And the speaker series, and the title Wild and Awake, really comes from this place as we wake up into our potential, into our possibilities. We're undomesticating ourselves. What I think of as we're rewilding ourselves. We're finding those parts that are more essential to our own truth. And you're speaking about that right here. It's like, oh yes, how do I find my way there?
Yeah. 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 It's so illuminating, I think, for us to realize that there are so many different ways. You know what? There are some people that are here, women that are here to be mothers, or to be nurses, or to be caretakers. Cancer mysteries, right? Pisces is here to be a healer. Capricorn's here to figure out how to be the wise woman and get things done in the most effective and efficient way. It's a learning essence. So sometimes we come from a lineage that say somebody was coming from, this is my mother, actually. She came from the Aries lineage. She was Venus in Libra. So she was trying to learn how to do relationships. So she found herself having to give up her ability to determine her own way because of the patriarchal culture that she found herself in. And so she never really found a partner that would honor her for who she was, and not who they wanted her to be. They wanted her to be what they wanted her to be, and she wasn't that. And so it was difficult for her. So sometimes it's like, how are we navigating these pieces?
Yes. Yeah. And where do we have choice in them?
Right. Exactly.
I wanted to speak to a couple things. One is that I know in your life, you've chosen a partner right now. What's the acronym you're using?
I call him my BHE, best husband ever.
Which is beautiful. And I recognize that he's got your back. He's in support of you. And just speaking to some of what allows us as women in this time that is really distinctly different from the past times, where the residue of that fear of being burned at the stake. I call it the witch wound that many of us, myself included, has taken a long time coming into my own power and voice in this culture because of fear of being condemned in some way. And that's unlikely here in the United States to be being burned at the stake, but it could be being ridiculed or being not taken seriously, right? In other ways, shamed, or having a business that's not successful because people are saying poor things, right? So we've got ways that we put each other down, we get brought down. And so the container that you and I are weaving right now, when you speak about your best husband ever, being someone who has your back, and there's another element too that I was really moved by when we spoke earlier, which is your vision of how women work together. Do you mind taking that thread and unfurling that a little? You've really you're working that in your life culture.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity back in 1995, and just as I was turning age 39, so that was a while back. Back in 1995, to engage in a priestess process, meaning that it was women coming together to awaken the priestess within them. So the person facilitating it said, you already are a priestess. We just need to remember that part of ourselves, because we have mother, maiden, crone, but we should have mother, or maiden, mother, priestess, crone, right? That there's more aspects.
Priestess, can you speak a little bit more, defining that for the average woman who's watching this, who up till now it's been something that maybe is what you and I have teased, that's called the P word. Like we didn't even use the P word for a long time, because people were like, oh no, people will make fun of me if I call myself a priestess. So
there were priestesses in the temples in ancient times, and their job was to know when to do the certain ceremonies, whether it was a rite of passage ceremony, a seasonal ceremony, new moon, full moon ceremony, planetary alignments, or whatever that was going on, or when things were out of balance in the community, they would know when it was time to do the ceremonies. And so they were honored, and they were held in high esteem. When the patriarchal culture came in, they disbanded the priestesses from the temple, put priests in there. There might have been priests already, but basically the women had to flee. And and then it became like something you just didn't discuss. It wasn't talked about. And so when I was going through my priestess process, they didn't want to use the P word. They didn't want to tell people they were becoming or allowing themselves to remember their priestess energy, that there's all of us have the ceremonial aspect within us, to honor life as sacred, to know the sacredness of whatever it might be that we're engaging in. And so they said, yeah, I don't use the P word. But that's really changed. I mean, I think it's pretty much everywhere now. And there may be still some communities you wouldn't want to use that word, but I think it's about allowing women to recognize that they can come together in ceremony, in a sacred way, to support one another, to celebrate one another, to honor certain timings and certain ways of being with each other. And it's like high magic usually happens in my experience when doing these things, doing the priestess thing. Now, of course, because women were pitted against each other, and it was women turning women in and getting them burned at the stake, or like if to maintain their place or for their survival for whatever reasons, they were doing that. So they would gossip about each other. They'd put each other down, that kind of thing. That we're moving out of that time. We're moving into a time where we can come together and celebrate and support each other. And then also to recognize that everyone has a purpose. Everyone has something they bring to the table. I love you using the table, because we often talk about the round table. It's like we all sit equal, all our different parts sit equally around the table, but we should all also equally sit around the table when we're in community. And that the wisdom and perspectives of each person, especially women coming together, can be honored and valued, and not dismissed or put down for any reason. So it's not easy, and it does take some time, and sometimes people get triggered. I've had that experience. And I remember a woman coming up to me some years ago, and she said, I just have to apologize to you for what I said a couple months ago. We hadn't seen each other in a couple months. And I said, "What did you say?" And she told me what it was. I don't remember it now, but she told me what it was. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, I sort of remember that. What I realized, it was her, she had gotten triggered and she said something, but it wasn't really about me, and it just went right by me. I've had people say things to me that will trigger me. And then then I have to do my own work and deal with that. But it's like, she had the insight enough to come and apologize to me for that. And I'm like, we're growing. We're getting better. It's like, oh, I recognize that I was triggered, and what I said to you wasn't the right, was mine, not yours, kind of thing. And so I feel like, because women used to support each other that way long before we had this dominator culture that was trying to separate women and pit them against each other. And so we're really in an amazing time where
we get to relearn that. It's also like, there isn't a handbook, and it's like, how do we show up in circles? I'm in several women's circles that have been amazing, and one that's actually been about 27 years that I've been in. I think you've been in one about that long too, or when we know people that long, and it amazes me. Stuff still comes up. We might be in a circle and there's something like a clothing swap or something, and there's a dynamic that happens, that the old way of being, or the way of being that we're enculturated in, might have us comparing ourselves to each other, putting somebody down, or being a little
taking
bit
it personally.
taking it personally.
Something that wasn't personal, but we took personally, and then we projected it back out. And made it the other person's fault, or seeing them as so when we are really conscious and we're willing to take responsibility for our own experience, and recognize that if we really have a commitment to support one another, there's so much more we can accomplish together than we can when we're like fighting with each other, or not really supporting one another.
I can see the web of so many places that this goes. I just want to acknowledge you also for the ways that you have, there was that women's circle back then, but there's also the ways that you offer your teachings, and the way that you're so generous with the information that comes through, and the way that you're working in small groups with other women who have similar visions, and just all of it. I just want to lay this on the table, because these examples, we don't get to see these examples in our daily life unless we're exposed to it. Like, this is one way to be in circle with women, and it's a powerful one.
Thank you. Yeah, I love that.
There's a piece of work I want to make sure that we talk about today, so I'm going to jump there, which is, you mentioned earlier about the Venus cycles, and we are in a really powerful time right now on so many levels. Everyone that we're speaking to, there's a lot shifting and changing, and there's a perspective that I know that you look through, and that you help to make sense of things with women, which is the Venus cycle, and connecting to Inanna as well. This idea that we're going through shifts and changes. Is there anything that would be helpful for us to understand right now about this time that we're in, given that framework?
Yeah, oh, totally. So the Venus cycle is the Sumerians and the Babylonians created stories. One was the goddess Inanna, who makes her journey to the underworld. She's the queen of heaven and earth. The other, and that's the Sumerian story. Yeah, there she is. Beautiful. I love that card. And then there's Ishtar, who was the Babylonian name for the same goddess. And they tell the same story, but they have different names for the people in the story. And the story describes how Venus moves through the sky. So as she becomes morning star, and then she starts her descent into the underworld, and to go to visit the dark goddess, her sister, whose husband has died, and she's going to the funeral, and she has to go through these gates into the underworld, and they represent different chakras. And so, and then she finally gets to the underworld, and her sister basically is jealous and angry and has just lost her husband, and and she kills her, hangs her up on a meat hook, leaves her there. And Inanna knew when she went in that it might not be safe, so she has basically the planet Mercury. So Venus is the planet Venus, and then her sister Ereshkigal or Reshkigal, there's different ways it's pronounced, is the sun, because when Venus is with the sun, you don't see her, she's in the underworld. And then she goes to Enki and Enlil. I think Enlil's Inanna, the moon god. I forget who Enlil is, maybe Saturn, and then Enki's Jupiter. Anyway, they go to the different, Mercury goes and visits them, or Ninshabar goes and visits them, and winds up being able to send help and gets Inanna back. And there's a whole more of that story. But then she rises up as an evening star, and she starts reclaiming everything she had to let go of on her way into the underworld. So it's definitely like a death, like a descent, death, re-empowerment, and ascent back into who she really is. So I like to say she's dying to who she thought she was, so she could be reborn to who she really is. So we each go through every 8 years a 19-month cycle of Venus. And one of the things I find fascinating is when I started my priestess work, I was in my 8-year Venus return. I was 39, but it lasts 19 months, and I'm an evening star. So it had started a good year before, a good year and a half, or almost a year and a half before my 40th birthday. Age 40. So there's 5 Venus cycles. You can see the 5-pointed star. Venus rises as the morning star every 19 months. And then 5 risings of Venus brings her back to the starting point every 8 years. So 5 times 8 is 40. The age 40 Venus return is significant, super significant. They're all significant, but it's like that number magic of 5 times 8. And it changed my life. It was so, I learned about the Venus cycle in my age 40 Venus return. I became a priestess, started working with the priestess community in my age 40 Venus return. It's amazing.
Powerful.
Yeah.
And so for women who are, or anyone, I'm assuming this goes for men as well,
Men
right?
too.
So for people,
Yep.
for anyone, that this
Absolutely.
cycle is actually a place where we get to really recognize and look at who we are, the death of one identity,
Yes.
and the re-choosing or the choosing of something else.
Yes. And I think that one of the ways to look at it is releasing, letting go. So as Inanna's going into the underworld, or Ishtar's going into the underworld, at each gate, she's releasing, letting go of a vestment that represents a chakra. So the first thing is her crown. She lets go of her crown, and the way she identifies with spirit, and herself in the greater, more cosmic divine design thing, whatever that's about. And I see it as not releasing the connection so much as releasing the distortions connected to it. So then when she comes back and she gets her crown back, after she goes down through the 7 chakras, she comes back up through the 7 chakras. When she gets her crown back, she's reclaiming a healthier relationship with the divine, with spirit, with that divine essence. So yeah, it's pretty amazing, and it can be so life-changing. We started leading people through this as a ceremony back in 2014. That's a whole other story. I won't tell now, but the way it even started, and nobody was working with the Venus cycle as a ceremony at the time. Now everybody's doing it. Not everybody, but so many are doing it. It's just like it exploded.
Right. It's right timing. And it's one of those things where it starts coming into our modern culture as a languaging that we can understand. We can use it as a tool. It's part of what I'm wanting people to hear right now, is that this is actually a tool that can help us to map.
Yeah. And one of the things I've loved so much about doing this, it's been life-changing for me to engage every Venus cycle as, and lead people through it as a ceremony, as the intent of what it was really, the Sumerians and the Babylonians were seeing it as, and how many have told us how life-changing it has been for them. That's just so amazing. I'm just like, I know it's life-changing, but it's nice to get the feedback.
Yeah. And for everyone who's listening to this right now, the things are shifting in a kind of way that's going to impact all of us in August. Am I correct about that?
Yeah. So, well, let me just say first that the cycle we're currently in is Venus is evening star. So she's reclaiming herself as the wise one. This is the Capricorn metagoddess, as the grandmother, as the wise one, as the one who knows how to get things done in the most effective and efficient way, how to really be in relationship to the earth in a healthy, effective, efficient way, and get the best results as for the least amount of effort. That's what Capricorn's all about. So we're in that process now until August. In August, Venus will rise as morning star in Leo. So that'll be the Leo meta goddess on the world stage. And she's all about, how do we show up and shine and be who we truly are? How do we have so much self-love and self-confidence and self-acceptance and self-approval and self-respect, all the self things Leo's very focused on, all that, for the purpose of shining our light to inspire others to shine theirs. That's when she comes on the world stage, that's what she's all about. But the descent into the underworld is about releasing everything in the way of that, or, letting that go, and or transmuting and transforming it so that it's not preventing us from experiencing our true, radiant, divine, sovereign expression of ourself. I love this. I love all the cycles. They all have something amazing.
Yeah, of course they do. And
yes.
I think what a perfectly timed, all of us we're heading into the season right now, moving into summer, depending on where you are on what side of the planet you're on.
Right.
Yeah. Acknowledging that we have some people down under watching us, but there's the sense that the planetary alignment is here also supporting us. It's like the support to be shifting and changing. And so for those of us who are feeling in that place of vulnerability or lack of our self-value right now, to recognize that this is actually part of what's occurring, right? This is part of the alchemy of the changes.
Yeah, it is. Alchemy, I love it, because of course we call ourselves Venus alchemy. And it's the alchemy of the divine feminine, and allowing really within ourselves, if we can really connect within ourselves with a true, authentic, genuine expression of the feminine that we are here to bring forth. First of all, it's life-changing, magical, amazing, it's the best. It's so good. But second of all, it's like we're then vibrating with that energy and putting that into the world, and that changes everything if there's enough of us. And it doesn't take a lot of us. It's like in my transcendental meditation days, they talked about the superconductive field. And when you were creating a superconductive field, it was only the amount of electrons that had to come into coherence was n squared. So a small number, not even 1%, have to, come into that coherent field, and they're really chaotic. And as they get closer and closer to the superconductive field, it gets more chaotic. So we can see that's happening. So it's definitely getting more chaotic on the planet. But there's a few of us wild and awake, waking up into this higher vibrational energy of love. Love is the energy that's going to change it all. And so when we're really, how do I want to say this? When we're really embodied in love, when we're really vibrating with love, and there's enough of us, it will change everything in the blink of an eye. Yeah. The whole mess that we're experiencing, because that's what happens in the superconductive field. It's like chaos everywhere. A few things start lining up in coherence, and then boom, it all lines up in a superconductive field, and no lower vibrational energy or lower, more chaotic energy can penetrate that field. Yeah, it just can't, because it's, it's like this is what we're going for.
What we're going for.
That's what we're going for.
You've answered my question in so many different ways, but I'm going to ask this question because I'm asking all of the speakers this question, which is, how do we live our best life right now? How do we live our best life right now? This entire conversation could be under that title, right?
Right.
But given that as a question, is there anything more that you'd like to add?
I have thought for a long time that part of the answer to that question is to love ourselves no matter what, no matter how much we've messed up, no matter how failed we feel we are, or whatever those limiting beliefs have been for us that somehow we haven't accomplished enough or done enough or, shown up enough or whatever that's about. It's like, how do we recognize that really our presence on this planet, and especially if you're watching this, you have an awareness. You are already vibrating with energy that is helping the planet. You don't need to do anything more. Just to be able to acknowledge that and recognize that and celebrate that, that is how we can live our best life. And I will say, one of the things that happened to me when my life was being burned to the ground that I mentioned earlier, I read Lynn Andrews' book, Medicine Woman. And
Ooh, yes.
and all these magical experiences she was having, and she had challenges too, but I was like, I got done reading that book and I said, I want to live a magical life. I made the declaration to the universe.
Yes.
And it wasn't long after that, the magic started happening, and it just continues to grow and grow and grow. And that was like 35 years ago.
Calling it in.
I know, it's like, and I didn't even know about intention and whatever, but I just said it out loud, like, I want to live a magical life. And it all started to unfold after that. So I think that is another thing, is we need to intend it. If we just, and we don't really need to do something, although it can be helpful to take care of ourselves, to get enough sleep, to, eat right, to do things that are nurturing and healthy for ourselves. But to intend it,
Yes.
that I was already doing some of that.
All the difference.
Yeah, it makes all the difference. Yeah.
Kaylin, I want to thank you so much for being here today. This has just been a dynamic, beautiful conversation. And for all the listeners, absorbing this in, taking it in, listening to this again, feeling into what parts of this are speaking to the parts of you that are waking up, that are ready to hear. Right? Because this is really like, as we go into Inanna, as we go on down, we're forgetting and reclaiming. And this is just such a powerful chapter right now. Want to thank you very much for your gifts. We have two really beautiful gifts. They're both meditations. One is a journey through the elements, and the other is the Venus story as told by the Sumerians. And so it's a longer version, more in depth, I'm assuming, of what you've shared with us today.
Yeah, it's a journey. It's got music. You can lay down, you can listen, you can really have, ideally you have the whole experience of the entire Venus cycle in 27 minutes.
And then I love that you also have some links there too for people to find out more information, to be able to join your, you have a wonderful regular letter that I received that helps me understand what's happening planetarily. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Yes.
And wanting to thank all of the listeners who are here today in the bravery and curiosity it takes to be standing at sort of this cusp of time that we're in, with allowing ourselves to recognize that we have agency and we have choice in how we take in the information and how we expand and how we're curious. So thank you, everyone who's here, absorbing in this way. Thank you, Kaylin, for offering us this just rich meal of ideas and ways to build this planet.
My pleasure. And I'm just so delighted. And I just imagine that we are all here to change the world together. And so, yay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And that changing the world together is also like, it starts with our own internal relationship right here in all the many beautiful ways that you've expressed, but also in being willing to slow down, being willing to drop in, being willing to go into the Inanna's journey. So I'm going to encourage everybody to listen to that beautiful meditation and take your own journey in and out. And as we're here co-creating change, I think of it like that little droplet, the little pebble into the lake, and the ripples are going out. Thank you for that pebble in this lake today, Kaylin.
Oh, it was so fun to drop that pebble. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here, and aloha.
Aloha.